All right, so let's jump right into it today. We're looking at some pretty interesting market activity. European defense stocks are going through the roof, and well, we've got two recent news articles here that suggest things might be a little more complicated than they seem on the surface. So the UK and France are kind of leading this push for peace deal in Ukraine.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing here is that, this surge in these stocks isn't just a random blip on the radar. This has been steadily building since the war began and seems to be connected to some recent statements by U.S. President Trump.
Right.
He's expressed skepticism about Ukraine being ready for peace and even hinted at pulling back U.S. support. So
Mhm.
definitely causing ripples of concern across Europe.
Definitely causing some concern.
Mm.
And we're definitely seeing this play out in the markets right now, like companies like BA Systems, Rheinmetall, Thales, Leonardo, all seeing these massive jumps, some even reaching 16%.
Yeah.
And the FTSE 100, the UK's main stock index, hit a record high this week. And these companies played a part in that, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. And
Mm.
and it's not just the big names either. I mean, Airbus, Safran, even Rolls-Royce hitting record highs. So we're seeing a broader trend here where defense is becoming really, really attractive to investors.
Right. So, I mean, is this all just a reaction to the war in Ukraine, or is there something a little bit deeper going on here?
Well, I think the articles point to a deeper shift actually in European defense strategy. Trump's comments and his meeting with Zelensky seem to have sparked a sense of urgency among some of those European leaders.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they're reevaluating their reliance on the U.S. for military support.
So it's interesting because, like, the UK and France are actively working towards this peace deal. Like,
Hmm.
you think that would be signaling a de-escalation, not,
Yeah.
like we need more defense.
Right. Yeah. Well, they are pushing for peace, but at the same time, they're also pushing for more defense spending across Europe,
Okay.
which suggests a move towards greater self-sufficiency. Like they're preparing for a future where they might have to rely more on their own, capabilities.
And it seems like they're not just talking about it either. Like, the UK has already committed to raising their defense spending to 2.5% of their GDP by 2027,
Wow.
which is 3 years ahead of schedule.
Right.
And then you've got Macron in France. He's calling for even more than that. He's pushing for European nations to spend above 3%
That's bold.
of their GDP on defense.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, these are big commitments, especially considering that the UK wants to fund this increase by cutting international aid.
Right. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
that's going to be a controversial move for sure. I mean, it could really impact their international standing.
Absolutely. So it kind of sounds like Europe is stepping out from under the U.S.'s military umbrella a little bit. I mean, do we have any expert opinions that kind of support this idea?
Yeah, actually, we do. Holger Schmeiding from Berenberg Bank, for example, he emphasizes the need for Europe and particularly Germany to really significantly ramp up their defense spending for themselves and for Ukraine.
Right.
And he believes that, this isn't just a temporary thing. This is like a fundamental change in European defense thinking.
So this idea of a European rearmament cycle, like the J.P. Morgan analysts are calling it, does that mean that Europe is kind of moving towards producing more of its own military equipment instead of relying on imports from the U.S.?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And JP Morgan actually predicts that many of the 30 NATO members in Europe will commit to significantly higher defense budgets.
Wow.
And they're even hinting at which sectors within the defense industry are likely to benefit the most. So,
Interesting. So instead of just buying finished equipment from the U.S., Europe might be looking to invest more in research and development and production of, like, key technologies,
hmm.
like drones, cyber defense systems, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. I mean, this potential shift in spending could create massive opportunities for European defense companies,
Yeah.
driving growth and innovation within the sector.
Which probably explains why those stocks are doing so well right now.
Right. But before we get too carried away with all the excitement, I think it's important to acknowledge a more cautious perspective. Yeah. Chris Beauchamp, the chief market analyst over at IG, he points out that, this euphoria might not immediately translate into actual budget increases.
So there's still a little bit of uncertainty there.
Yeah.
Governments still need to finalize budgets, and, priorities can change.
Absolutely. And, the overall market performance is influenced by a ton of factors. Interest rate changes, President Trump's trade policies, all that can have an impact on the momentum that we're seeing in the defense sector.
Right. So lots to consider. It's not as simple as it might seem at first glance.
Definitely not.
Okay, well, it's
Yeah.
uh, I mean, this feels so much bigger than just, like, stock prices going up.
Mm.
Is Europe really on the verge of, like, a whole new era of military self-reliance? I mean, if so, what does that even mean for the whole global landscape.
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? I mean, it seems like Europe is really reevaluating its strategy,
Yeah.
prompted by all this uncertainty surrounding U.S. support. And a more militarily independent Europe could completely change the dynamics within NATO and transatlantic relations and potentially lead to a more, multipolar world where power is more evenly distributed.
That makes me think about like global security.
Hmm.
I mean, could a stronger, more unified European defense force lead to more stability? Or would it create new tensions, new competition?
Yeah, it's tough to say. I mean, it's a complex issue. There's no easy answers. On the one hand, a more assertive Europe could help stabilize the region and, act as a counterbalance to potential threats. But on the other hand,
Yeah.
it could also lead to more competition and friction, especially if European interests start to differ significantly from those of the U.S. Imagine a scenario where Europe and the U.S. disagree on how to handle a major international crisis.
That's a pretty significant what if. And I'm also curious how a shift in European defense strategy might impact their relationships with other key players like Russia and China. I mean, could it lead to new alliances? Or could it escalate existing tensions?
Right. Those are all really important questions to think about. I mean, a more assertive Europe could definitely lead to a recalibration of alliances, maybe strengthening ties with some countries while creating distance from others. And I think it's crucial to remember that all of this speculation about future scenarios is ultimately driving investor behavior.
Right.
The market is reacting to the possibility of a fundamental shift in the global order.
Yeah.
And that has implications that go way beyond just, defense companies making more money.
That's a really good point. We've kind of focusing on the big picture here.
Yeah.
But let's not forget about the impact on specific companies. I mean, we've mentioned the major players, but what about some of the others? Like Kinetic, the UK defense technology firm, saw a 12% jump.
Yeah.
And Dassault Aviation, the French aircraft manufacturer, they're up 15%.
Yeah, exactly. This surge is impacting a wide range of companies involved in, research, development, production across the entire defense ecosystem. I mean, increased spending could lead to more contracts, greater investment, accelerated innovation, and ultimately higher profits. And that's what investors are excited about.
It's like a chain reaction almost.
Okay.
And that initial spark is coming from this shift in European defense thinking.
Precisely. But as Chris Beauchamp reminded us earlier, translating this excitement into actual budget increases could take time.
Right.
I mean, governments have to deal with their own internal politics, economic considerations, and, priorities can change. So we can't assume that this is a guaranteed win for investors just yet.
So there's still that level of uncertainty, even though the market is really excited about this potential European rearmament cycle.
Right. And we also can't forget about the influence of other market forces. Interest rate changes, President Trump's trade policies.
Yeah.
All of that can impact things, even if the overall sentiment is positive.
So many moving parts. It's not as simple as it might seem on the surface.
Definitely not. It's a really complex situation.
And in the midst of all this complexity, I think it's worth asking, like, what does this mean for you, the listener? Why should anyone outside the defense industry care about these, soaring stocks and these geopolitical shifts?
Well, it's easy to feel powerless in the face of these huge global changes.
Right.
But that's exactly why awareness is so crucial. And by listening to this deep dive, you've already taken a proactive step.
Right.
You're now equipped with the knowledge to understand these forces that are shaping our world.
Yeah.
And that empowers you to make informed decisions and have meaningful conversations.
It's a lot to wrap your head around, right? Like all these huge geopolitical shifts. I mean, as just like an individual, what can I even do with all this information,
It's easy to feel kind of powerless, but I think that's where, awareness comes in. By listening to this deep dive, you're already being proactive.
Okay.
You're arming yourself with knowledge to understand these forces that are shaping our world.
Right.
And that allows you to make informed decisions and engage in, thoughtful discussions.
So it's not just about like, investing in defense stocks. It's about being a more informed and engaged citizen in general.
Exactly. You can stay informed about what's going on in the world, participate in thoughtful discussions, even advocate for policies that align with your values.
Right.
It's about recognizing that these shifts on the global stage impact us all and taking an active role in shaping the future.
So instead of feeling like overwhelmed or paralyzed by all these changes, we can actually use this knowledge to participate in the conversation.
Absolutely. And remember, you don't have to have all the answers.
Right.
The important thing is to stay curious, keep learning, and, engage in open and honest dialogue about these complex issues.
Okay, so let's kind of recap what we've learned here today.
Yeah.
European defense stocks are soaring, fueled by the war in Ukraine, potential U.S. withdrawal of support, and a pretty clear push for greater European autonomy.
Yeah. Right. And this shift in European defense strategy could reshape, global alliances, the balance of power, with implications for everyone. It's a pretty significant moment in history, and the decisions being made today will definitely have long-lasting consequences.
This has been a lot to take in, but really, really interesting.
It has. But remember, this is an ongoing story.
Yeah.
And we'll be here to help you make sense of it as things develop.
Absolutely. And on that note, we'll leave you with a final thought-provoking question to ponder. So if this trend toward European self-reliance continues, what role will the U.S. play in European security in the future? Will we see a shift in the global balance of power?
That's a great question, one with no easy answers. But it's a question that will shape the geopolitical landscape for years to come. So keep exploring, keep questioning, and stay tuned for more deep dives as the situation evolves.
Until next time, happy learning.